it's important for us to remember that we are co-creators of our life. We're not passengers. We're not passive in this journey. And while there are a lot of things that we can't control, we can absolutely control how we participate in life. And so I have spoken about vision before, and how vision should be your starting point, not your end point. And that is because you want to envision what it is that you want, and then ask yourself the question, well, if that was already real for me, how would I be in the way that I habitually think, feel, and act? Now, our subconscious mind is nothing more than our nervous system. So when you're learning to drive a car, what you're doing is, in the beginning, it's a very conscious process. You have to really think about what you're doing, and when your concentration drifts away, then everything falls apart. But the more that you do it, eventually what you do is you start building those connections, neurological connections in your nervous system. And when that's been wired in, now the nervous system has the circuitry. So you don't have to be consciously focusing on what you're doing. You can just run those circuits. And we have wired ourselves up in many different ways. We've wired ourselves up in the stories we tell ourselves. We've wired ourselves up in the responses that we habituate in certain situations, and so on. And if we continue to just operate out of that existing wiring, well, then we're going to keep putting in the same energy, taking the same actions, have the same responses to the same situations as we always have had. You see, we don't experience life, we experience the life that we focus on. If I took you to a shopping mall and I said to you, see how many people you can count wearing green, and at the end of that exercise I said how many people were wearing yellow, you wouldn't be able to tell me, because you were filtering for green. And in the same way, we create habits of focus. We focus on the same things in the same situations. And so if I step back a little bit, our senses are limited to begin with. I mean, our eyesight as human beings, we cannot process or even receive the full spectrum of light. We know that. And even the spectrum, the part that we can, birds, especially more so your birds of prey, have far superior eyesight to us. We know that certain animals, dogs even, have superior hearing to us. They can hear things that our ears cannot pick up. So to begin with, we are not even experiencing the full range of life. Then what we're doing is we're actually deleting most of what we process, most of what's coming through the senses. So we're not even processing a lot of it. Back to my point about how many people wearing green. You're processing that. Now, what determines what we focus on are the questions that we ask ourselves. And these questions become habit. And so you might find, and I'll give you an example, in South Africa, we are dealing with a massive problem with our infrastructure crumbling. And one of the things I realized is that I'd be driving along the roads, and where was my constant focus? Was on potholes, on the unkept, crumbling infrastructure. And then what it was, why is it like this? How can this government do this? And notice that the question that you ask shifts your focus. So if I ask myself the question, how can this government just let everything go to rack and ruin and steal all the money and everything else? Well, there's no good answer to that, is there? But the way that the brain works is it has to give you an answer. And so it's going to keep coming up with all sorts of answers, and then that links into stories that the mind creates, and before we know it, we're so sucked in, and that affects how we feel, affects our energy, and affects what we are bringing in the participation of life. What I'm training myself, and I want to emphasize the word training, because in the same way that you learn to drive a car, you can create new neural connections. You can train it into your nervous system, a different way of thinking, a different focus, a different way of feeling in situations. And so again, we don't experience life, we experience the life we're focusing on, because what we focus on determines, well, that's the raw material that we're using to make meaning. And it's the meaning that we put to things. So the meaning for me was, all right, well, everything's falling apart. Everything's falling apart. Now, that put me in a state of anger, frustration, depression even, about what the future might hold. If I ask a different question, something like, where are the opportunities here, right? How can I grow and expand and take advantage of hidden opportunities, and where are those opportunities? It's a very different question. Or what I'm training myself to do is just look at nature. And so instead of focusing on the potholes, it's like, hey, how beautiful is that tree? How beautiful isn't it amazing that when people don't clear nature away, nature just reestablishes itself. That's amazing. Now, you might say, well, that's really just fooling yourself. Well, yes, it is, and it isn't, right? Because truth is subjective. It's, well, what is truth for you? If you went to the shopping mall and you're focused on people wearing green, you'd come back and saying, I can't believe how many people are wearing green. Somebody else says, don't be ridiculous. No one was wearing green, they were all wearing blue. The truth is subjective. Our experience of life is subjective, and it's got to do with the meaning that we attach to it. And the meaning that we attach to it is fundamentally shaped by the questions we ask ourselves, because the questions shift our focus. So where's your focus? What are the things you're focusing on? And what are the habitual questions that you ask yourself? Now, how do you change that? Well, start recognizing what you're focusing on, because what you're focusing on is determining the quality of your life, the quality of your experience. And you have control over what you choose to focus on. So are you participating in life? I've done a lot of thinking recently around vision. And what I've realized is that this letting go and surrendering is a very, very important part. But what I'm reintegrating is the importance of still having that vision. Now, let's talk about that for a second. All right, when you start to tune into your enthusiasm, remember, enthusiasm is theos, comes from the word theos, the Greek word, which means God, and in theos means the God within us, right? Divine. So when you tune into what is it that makes you feel enthusiastic, where are you enthusiastic? Focus there. Focus your energy there. And when you focus on what you're enthusiastic about, what vision starts to emerge? Try to allow that enthusiasm to paint the picture of a vision in the future. Because to the extent that you can do that, rather than going, right, this is what I want and this is what I see happening, because then it's coming from the ego, or at least the danger is it's coming from the ego. But if you tune into your enthusiasm and let the vision paint itself in your mind from that place of enthusiasm, there's much more chance that starts to become an inspired vision. Now, it's not going to be the full vision, because we don't have the capacity as human beings to kind of comprehend such complexity. But we're going to get the unfolding of that vision, and that will allow us to start to see and get a glimpse of what it might be. And then, all right, put your focus there. All right, so if that's the vision that's kind of unfolded through the enthusiasm, then, all right, if that was real, if that was real, now see it and then feel it. Like, feel it as though it's real now. If you can see it and feel it, and you do that consistently, right? Emphasis on the word train. Train yourself, which means practice it. You didn't learn to drive the car the first time you got in. You learned by practicing it. Anything that we learn is about repetition. And so when you see the vision, you feel it. You see the vision, you feel it. You see the vision, you feel it. What you start doing is you start training your nervous system to expect it. You start shifting your filters to start noticing opportunities that are going to lead you towards that vision. But if we focused on all the problems, we focus on all the negatives, we focus on all the obstacles, then we literally filter out the opportunities. In the same way that when you're looking for green, you see green. You don't see any other color. So by seeing the vision, feeling it, you start to train yourself, not only your nervous system, to get into that energetic state of energy, which then, remember, that energy, life happens through us, not to us. So that energy, life is coming through that energy, so that we are participating with that quality of energy. We're tuning in with that frequency of energy. But at the same time as well, our filters, our perceptual filters, are starting to notice, because we are programming the way we filter. We're programming ourselves to notice, consciously and subconsciously, all the things that we need to notice that will lead us towards that. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're challenged by a lot of negativity in your environment, just remember, where are you focusing? What are the questions that you're asking yourself that are keeping you in that focus loop? And then ask a different question. Number 2, tune into what you're enthusiastic about, and let that vision paint itself in your mind from or through that enthusiasm. And then see the vision, feel it, see the vision, feel it, consistently, repetition, so that that feeling and in the body just becomes your default. You just naturally feel that way. You start to become the very thing, the very person that you need to become for that vision to be a reality. And at the same time, what that will start doing, if you're focusing on that, is you will start to notice opportunities that will lead you towards that vision. So this has just been helpful for me, because I find that as I'm learning these things, sometimes I learn something, and then as I learn it, then I integrate it with other stuff that I've already learned. Now, last thing I just want to say is, just remember to stay detached from that vision. So use the vision to generate the feelings, and use the vision to train yourself to be in that state. But don't get too attached to the picture, to the actual picture, because life won't necessarily always turn out exactly how that vision might look in your mind. But it's a starting point.